Hey Tea-Heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to smell. Yes, I know what you're thinking. What are you talking about, Don? I know how to smell. I've been smelling my whole life. And you're right, because the sense of smell is so fundamentally important that it's one of the few senses which is fully formed at birth. It is the most essential and fundamental way to discern dangers, to discern attractions, to learn, to navigate yourself in this soup of information that we call reality. And it is so fundamental for the appreciation of tea, of food, of any drink, of perfumes, flowers, just generally your appreciation of your life is so much improved if you can educate and fine-tune your sense of smell. So this video, out of all the videos I've made in terms of masterclasses, I think is so fundamentally important, which is why I'm dedicating an entire video to smell. So I'm going to be giving you 6 tips for how to smell better. Before we get into the tips, I want to talk to you about the way that the olfactory pathway works. In other words, how does smell come about? So what happens is, obviously, you're taking in odors up into your nose and in your mouth, but we'll talk about that later. And they are absorbed into the nasal mucosa and picked up by the olfactory receptors. Now, there's controversy about that, how that works. The old school idea is that it's shapes. It's like a key and a keyhole, that certain receptors receive certain shapes of odor molecules, and then that triggers off signals to be sent. However, we can discern over 1 trillion different smells, right? So this idea that humans are terrible at smelling and dogs are great, yeah, we can talk about the anatomy of a dog's nose versus a human's nose, and there are differences, but humans are extremely good at smelling and discerning odors. So the controversy is that people say, well, there's no way that there's enough different shapes to have 1 trillion different shapes for these odor molecules to fit. And so there is a theory which has been around for a while about a vibrational way of discerning smell. In other words, that the odor molecules may have certain shapes, but they also vibrate differently, and that those vibrations are picked up through quantum activity in the nose, which then sends different kinds of signals to the brain. You can get geeky and learn about all of those controversies and those theories about vibrational smell. Some of it is becoming more and more corroborated by evidence. But anyway, that's a separate thing. The point is that your sense of smell can be fine-tuned to such an amazing degree. Now, the sense of smell is so important that it's one of the only senses, it's the only sense which is hardwired to your brain. So there's a little bony plate between your nose and your brain, and there is direct connection to your olfactory cortex, your olfactory bulb, I should say. And that olfactory bulb is receiving instantly the information about smell. Smell is so important that your body has been designed to immediately send that information without any delay, without any extra pathway, direct to your brain. So it gets sent directly to your brain, to your olfactory bulb, and that olfactory bulb is like a train station, just receiving lots of information and trying to make sense of it, trying to create little packets of information. Well, that normally goes with that, and you know, they're creating packets. They're reducing certain signals, enhancing other signals to try to make sense of the smells that you are receiving. So there's an identification process happening there immediately, but it's done through what's called inhibition. So they're trying to reduce certain noise to try to make clarity and create little flavor packets or aroma packets from which you can discern. The information is very quickly sent to your limbic system, your emotional system, through to your amygdala to just get an emotional response. Is this something that scares you? Is this something that attracts you? Why is our sense of smell so linked to emotions? When you smell something, you immediately have an emotional response. It is so direct. because it goes directly to your amygdala. And then from there, it goes to your hippocampus. So memories are instantly triggered. So your smell is so closely linked to your memory, as we all know. How many times have you smelt a perfume or walked into a space that you haven't been to for years, and that sense of smell just brings you back emotionally, but also just through a sense of direct connection to that memory. It is remarkable. I just find the sense of smell so fascinating, and it's just so linked to memory, to emotion, to sense of danger, to sense of understanding of the world. It is just amazing. And then from there on, it goes to other areas of the brain where we try to work out other things about it. You know, we start to discern, you know, other long-term memories and other, you know, information that we've thought about before, and it becomes a little bit more, let's say, logical. But the instinctive reaction to smell is incredible. So that's the pathway of smell in its very vague form. You can obviously dive deeper, but I just wanted to showcase the way that your body has been developed to prioritize smell and link it to memory and emotion. So when you smell a tea and people have a reaction of like, oh, I don't like that, you're triggering an emotion. Now it's about then trying to understand what that emotion is and why you're getting that instinctive, that very powerful emotional response. Or of course the opposite, where you smell it and you just swoon and you fall in love. Right, we're gonna get into our 6 tips, but before we do, I want to do a little experiment with you all out there, which relates to the last tip, the 6th tip, but I don't want to talk to you about it right now. What I'd like you to do is, I hope you've got a tea in front of you. If not, grab a tea if you can. And what I'd like you to do is smell the tea, but what I'd like you to do first is, obviously, I heat up the guy 1, like this. Put your leaves in, so you've got a hot guy 1, or if you'd like, you can do it after you've rinsed your leaves, so the leaves are wet. I'm using today Cocoa Malt Queen, a ginger and May, amazing ginger and May tea. So what I'd like you to do is block off your left nostril. Listen carefully, block off your left nostril and breathe for a couple of minutes through your right nostril. And write down your flavor notes. Oh, the smell of this tea. Write down your flavor notes and write down the imagery that you come up with. Then after a couple of minutes, switch and breathe through the other nostril and write your tasting notes. I'm just interested to see, this is a completely wild experiment, but I'm interested to see whether or not you pick up different things and whether or not you just have a different experience when breathing through the left and right nostril. And it's worth noting that we breathe alternately through our left and right nostril at different rates. So there's always going to be one dominant nostril. The other nostril gets a little bit blocked by swollen turbinates, and then your brain, or your body, I should say, switches. So you're always going to have one nostril which is a little bit clearer to breathe through. Right now, it's my left nostril which is easier to breathe through than my right. So bear in mind that you might find that one nostril is a little bit harder to breathe through. But try to do this experiment. Take some time, take a few minutes, then come back, and we're going to talk about that in the 6th tip. So let's start with tip number 1. And tip number 1 is, before you smell anything, before you get into any appreciation of smell, you need to wake up your brain. And studies have shown that short, sharp sniffs, which you may see me doing in my videos, is instantly a signal to your brain to wake up and to get ready for scent information. So it is a way to prime yourself for more fine-tuned smelling. And I know that sounds a bit crazy, but the studies are in, and they have shown that that simple act of quick, short sniffs does engage activity in your olfactory system, probably your olfactory bulb, I have to check, but it definitely wakes up your sensory percept for smell. Your olfactory percept gets woken up by the sense, by this sniffing of just plain air. Right? So that's tip number 1, very, very simple. Tip number 2 is how fast you smell. Right, so if I pick up this guy 1 and I smell at a very slow pace, I'm picking up chocolate, some wet woods, lots and lots of rose, but the rose is not zesty. It's like Turkish delight. It's like deep, rich, sweet, like a rose cordial. I'm picking up some elements of malt. I'm picking up some elements of dried grass, hay, malt, but loads and loads of chocolate and rose. Chocolate and rose. Okay, now we're going to change it. Now I'm going to smell quickly. So I'm going to do short, sharp sniffs. Right? Totally different. I'm picking up pine resin. I'm picking up zesty rose. I'm picking up rose hip. I'm picking up cherries, but like sour cherries, very bright. And I compare that to the slow rose cordial, chocolate, malt. So what's going on here? Well, let me just rinse it. We'll do it one more time with the wet. So again, we'll start with slow. Oh, it's got a bit of a wine quality. Wine gums. Oh, loads of those chocolates. Yes, like sweetened fortified wine. Okay, now we're going to sniff this beauty with the short, sharp sniffs. I mean, I'm still picking up the chocolate, but it's all brighter. I'm more picking up the fruity notes. You know how chocolate can have that very red fruit acidity to it. I'm picking up much more acidity. I'm picking up the cherries and the rose hips. And that deep fortified wine is more like now, like a cherry cordial. So what is happening here? Okay, what I'd like you to do is imagine your nose is just like a tube, just to simplify things, right? So you've got the nostril entrance, and then you've got the part where it goes back across your adenoids and down into your throat, past your tonsils. And up at the top of this tube, around up here, is like a stamp-sized area where you have your olfactory receptors, where it's like rich in picking up all the information. And the olfactory receptors are covered by a nasal mucosa, right? Your mucus, right? So you've got a nasal mucosa covering and protecting your whole nose, and you've got this area which is picking up smell information. Right, now what I'd like you to do is imagine that there are 2 types of odor molecule. Now obviously it's on a spectrum this, but we're just going to broadly make them 2 types just to simplify things. There are low sorption molecules. These molecules take a long time to go into the nasal mucosa. And then you've got high sorption molecules that can travel across the nasal mucosa very, very quickly. High sorption molecules I associate with transient, very bright and high aromas, like the bright fruity notes, the zesty notes, etc. Low sorption molecules I associate, and I don't have evidence to pick this up. A lot of what I'm going to tell you today is a little bit of my theory mixed with my experience, mixed with what I've read in terms of papers, so feel free to correct me. But I associate low sorption molecules with having those more base notes, those chocolatey notes, the deeper notes, the sort of base notes. Whenever I talk about teas, I'm always talking about it in terms of EQ. You've got the bassier notes, you've got the sort of mid-tones, and you've got the high notes, the transient notes, the ones that dissipate very, very quickly. So when you are breathing fast, quick sniffs, what are you doing? You're sending all of these molecules up through your nose, but the low sorption ones don't get a chance to really get into your nasal mucosa. So you're down-regulating your smell of those compounds. Obviously, some do get through, but not as much, right? And you're doing the opposite for the high sorption one. You're providing, therefore, more emphasis on those transient high notes because they're getting into your nasal mucosa and they're getting picked up, whereas the other ones are not. But you might ask, well, okay, but if I breathe slowly, surely I pick up all of those high sorption ones anyway. So surely the slow breathing would pick up everything. Well, this is where, from the papers I've read, that is not the case, because in fact, what's happening is, imagine if you're breathing slowly, the low sorption molecules are having enough time to go in and really populate, or really go into, populate is a weird word, really go into the nasal mucosa and cover lots of the nasal receptors, so you're getting rich information to head up to the brain. Whereas the high sorption ones, because the air is traveling so slowly, they're all being absorbed in a very small part of your olfactory receptor range, right? So if you imagine it's like a stamp-sized area of your nose, if we sort of make that bigger for the purpose of this video, we imagine it like a square this big, or like this towel, let's say, right? The high sorption ones are getting absorbed in a smaller area because of the fact that they go into the nasal mucosa very, very quickly, right? Whereas the slow ones, the low sorption molecules, they have time to go in and they can cover more of the area. When you're breathing quickly, the low sorption molecules don't make it because you're breathing so quickly, they don't go into the mucosa enough. Whereas the high sorption ones, they go up and they can spread to a large amount because they're going in quickly, but you're breathing quickly, so you're covering a larger area. I hope that makes sense. So this is why the speed of how you sniff or smell makes a difference as to what you are discerning. And therefore, when you are appreciating anything, wine, tea, food, whatever it might be, sniffing fast and sniffing slowly, or breathing slowly through your nose, makes a big difference. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is kind of related to that, and that is try opening your mouth. And what happens is that your mouth picks up aroma molecules. Yes, on your tongue, there are olfactory receptors that are similar, not the same, but similar to the olfactory receptors in your nose, and they're linked with your taste buds or your taste cells. So you are picking up smell on your tongue, right? So, and what I get here is I get, usually when I open my mouth, I get more of the saltiness. So now that chocolate smells like it's salted chocolate. So I'm picking up some of the taste of it. I'm also picking up just a richer palate. I'm picking up more of those cherry notes. I'm picking up more of the rose cordial. I'm picking up a bit more leather, which wasn't in the smell when I was smelling it with my mouth closed. Let's try fast. Now, I don't think that the tongue information is any different when you breathe fast or slow. I might be wrong on that. It might have the same effect, but I never noticed that. But the fact that it's combining with more of those acidic notes just gives me different information. Sherbet. Turkish Delight sweets. So tip number 3, open your mouth. It adds complexity, adds richness, adds some flavor, some tasting notes like salt, sweet, sour, umami, those kinds of notes. It adds a little bit to the information. And it is a sense of smell on your tongue. So open your mouth, try different ways of smelling to lock off certain bits of information, to focus on others, and then extending it by opening your mouth so you have richer and more complex information. Tip number 4 is the difference between orthonasal and retronasal. So I said before that I threw a figure out there, 90% of taste is smell. I don't know what the actual figure is, but I think that that's not too far off. And yet people will often say to me, yeah, but you know, when I chew things in my mouth, I get so much more information. Well, part of the reason why you're getting more information is not because of the taste buds on your tongue, but it's because you're churning up more aromatics which are going up the nose backwards. So this way round, up, and they're going over your nasal receptors, your olfactory receptors, the other way around. That's called retronasal olfaction, retronasal smelling, versus orthonasal, which is coming up the way that we have just been practicing. And so, therefore, having tea in your mouth and drinking tea is also a way of smelling if you do it properly. So I'm going to brew this tea up. Now, you will have heard people slurping tea and aerating the tea, and this is, I think, something you need to practice. I think that that's a great way to agitate, atomize aroma molecules so that when you breathe out, you get more information. However, my word of warning, which I've said many times, is that it can also, if you do it too vigorously, it can send water vapor down your nose, and that I find is has a negative dampening effect on your ability to taste. Right, so I'm just going to drink now without breathing out through my nose. Try to block off my nose. I taste very little. I taste a bit of salty, I taste a bit of bitter, I taste a bit of sweet. The sense of taste is complicated. I'm not going to try to simplify things here. So it is complicated, but in general, it's more about discerning the nutritional benefits of a tea, or the sort of nutrition of tea. Is it bitter? Could it be therefore pharmacologically active? Could it be something that's poisonous or beneficial in terms of medicine? Is it salty? Is it sweet? How much carbohydrates is it going to give me? Is it sour? You know, it's more about discerning sort of the content of it in terms of its nutritional characteristics or profile. However, scent is different. Now, I've opened up my mouth immediately. I've opened up my nose immediately. I'm naturally getting retronasal olfaction. The air is going up, and I'm breathing out through my nose, and I'm getting loads of malt, loads of cream, loads of chocolate. Now, if I put the tea in my mouth and just move it around a little bit, and then breathe out through my nose while the tea's still in my mouth, so much information. I'm getting acorns, I'm getting foresty notes, like wet woodsy notes there. I'm getting moss. Touch of caramel. Like creamy note, but also like paper ream. So it's a bit more woodsy, a little bit more structured. Now, after you've swallowed, stop, take your time. You're getting this tingling sensation on your tongue. You're getting sweetness in your mouth as the minerals in this tea start to interact with your taste buds and all of the other physical receptors on your tongue to give a sense of pulling, a sense of dryness, a sense of astringency, a sense of juiciness. And that juiciness is generally sweet. But when I breathe out through my nose, I can start to color over that sense of sweet with more memory-related notes like brownies, creamy, buttery, slightly burnt brownies, for example. So, number 4, focus on both orthonasal and retronasal olfaction. Tip number 5 is you have to avoid fatigue. you're doing so much work in your brain when you are smelling. When you're smelling, as I said, those aromatic compounds are sending loads of signals to your brain. Your brain is trying to create those aroma packets, sending them to your amygdala, trying to get an emotional response, trying to get a memory response, trying to piece it together. What is this? Is this good? Is this bad? Should I be drawn to it? Should I be repelled by it? All of this information is happening. And then if you're engaging your brain to try to work out what it is, what it reminds you of, it's taking up energy. It's taking up power, right? And so you want to give yourself some breaks. So having a rest is very, very important. It's important that you drink tea, or whenever you're doing food or any appreciation, try to drink it in a more neutral environment where you're not having lots of smells around you. You know, drinking tea in nature is great. It's one of the most joyous things. However, you know, it also affects your sense of smell because you're picking up the smells of flowers, grass, air, etc. And it can add richness and complexity, great, but it also means it's harder to discern what is actually coming from the tea. So bring yourself in a neutral environment. Don't put any perfumes on. Don't put any scents on. Try not to have scent in the room. Now, if you want to then light incense, that's a whole different thing. That's more about pairing. It's like pairing food and tea. You're pairing scents and tea. That's different, very cool, a whole other video. But if you want to just discern the sense of smell of a particular tea or food, then putting yourself in a neutral environment is very important. Also, you can sniff this part of your skin. It's an amazing reset. It's sort of a neutralizer. It's neutralizing in the sense that obviously it's giving you a smell, but that smell is of you, and it's sort of like it just resets you. It's like the taste of water that suits you the best is the taste of water which is closest to the taste of your saliva, because we've associated our saliva taste as being invisible, as being neutral, right? When we know that's not the case, but we don't taste our saliva because it is neutral. Similarly, for our nose, that sense, that smell resets us. Some people use coffee beans. You can, but I find that that's not really doing much, but like giving you a blast of something very different. And I don't really particularly like it. So reset your nose and your brain by sniffing here. Take some breaks and be in an environment which is neutral. Just breathe air in an environment that's neutral. So that's tip number 5. All right, that leads us on to tip number 6. And I should really have called this video 5 tips plus a bonus, because this one is more my own weird theory than any concrete tip. But I have noticed over the years that there's a difference between smelling between the right nostril and the left nostril. So if you did that experiment at the beginning of this video, then I'd be interested to hear your results. Here's what I think is going on. The right nostril is connected to your left hemisphere of your brain. The left nostril is connected to the right hemisphere. And therefore, the different modalities or different ways of operating of the brain may apply. Now, left brain in a very broad sense, and you can dive into this as well if you want to dive deeper, the left brain is in charge of logic, is in charge of sequencing, is in charge of analysis, sort of facts, rationality. The right brain is much more about creativity, visual memory, intuition, like daydreaming, visualization, creative, right? And I have found when I've been doing these tests, which is the weird things that I do sometimes, is that I find it harder to come up with memories. And let's face it, tasting notes are memories, right? I find it harder to come up with good tasting notes, with tasting notes that link back to my memory, that I find to be very connected to me and the tea when I breathe through, when I smell through my right nostril. So, I mean, I know logically what I said before, chocolate, rose, and I can pick them up, which is why I wanted you to do this experiment before you figured out smells through other ways. But for some reason, everything feels muted. It doesn't feel like it's alive. It doesn't feel like it's emotive. It's not triggering a whole cascade of memories. Whereas, the smell through my left nostril is so much richer. It smells richer, but it's also bringing out more of my memory. I'm smelling, walking through a forest. I'm visualizing eating Turkish delights. I'm visualizing having a cup of hot cocoa. My left nostril, it gives me information, but I find that my brain is finding it harder to create imagery that I can then speak to you or write down when I'm creating my tasting notes. I find it fascinating. I would love to, this is why I would like to do this group experiment. I would love to know how you feel, because maybe it's just me. And maybe this whole theory is completely wrong, but I have a sense that you smell differently from your right and your left. And a lot of that difference is not the anatomy of the airflow, but is simply about how your brain is processing it, because you get that crossover effect where the right nostril is connected to the left hemisphere and the left nostril is connected to the right hemisphere. I find it fascinating. Another thing worth just noting is that breathing through your left nostril, so holding your right nostril shut and breathing through your left nostril, is a very classic yogic technique to relax, to bring you to a sense of calm and creativity, because possibly it's stimulating more activity in the right side of your brain. So a bit of a wild one. Let me know your thoughts on it. I could genuinely talk for hours about sense of smell, but the key takeaways here are that it is fundamentally important. It's one of the most important senses you have. It is the key sense that you need to develop whenever you want to discern anything, from tea tasting to food tasting to wine tasting to anything. The sense of smell is very, very important. Remember the 6 tips. Number 1, make sure that you sniff to wake yourself up, to wake up that part of your brain which is going to receive information. Number 2, experiment with speed of smell from slow to sniffing. Number 3, don't forget to open your mouth as well in those experimentations to get more complexity in terms of the information that you're receiving. Number 4, remember retronasal olfaction. Don't forget to breathe out through your nose when you've got food or drink in your mouth and after you've swallowed. Maximize your enjoyment of the experience through retronasal as well as orthonasal. Number 5, if you hit fatigue, take breaks in neutral environments, sniff that crook of your arm to neutralize, and just make sure that you give yourself enough rest before you go back into smelling. And number 6, the wild card, try smelling out of different nostrils and you'll find, I think, that you will have different experiences with the tea in front of you. That's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos, taste our teas wherever you're in the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being a part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags. Keep sniffing the good stuff and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.